In the high-stakes world of financial technology, one moment can change everything. A single command can save billions or destroy lives. But what happens when the only person who can save a crumbling empire is the son who never knew his father? Atlas Rourke, billionaire CEO of America's largest financial technology company, stares at the unfamiliar teenager standing before him. The boy's eyes, his eyes, stare back with unwavering confidence. "Who are you?" Atlas whispers. "I'm Jace. Jace Sloane." The world watches as father and son meet for the first time, with America's financial future hanging in the balance. The control room falls silent. The only sound is the alarm signaling financial collapse. 19 years earlier, Atlas Rourke wasn't a name that commanded respect or fear. He was just a brilliant graduate student with dark circles under his eyes and a thesis that refused to compile. The university computer lab at 3 a.m. was empty except for him, the blue light of the monitor reflecting off his exhausted face. His defense was in 5 hours, and his algorithm, the one that could revolutionize high-frequency trading, was crashing. "You're using the wrong stabilization protocol." The voice startled him. A woman stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, her curly hair pulled back in a messy bun. She wore a faded MIT sweatshirt and looked as tired as he felt. "Excuse me." Atlas's voice came out harsher than intended. She walked over, set her coffee down, and pointed at his screen. "Your buffer's overflowing because you're not accounting for the recursive calls. May I?" Too desperate to be proud, Atlas moved aside. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, making changes so quickly he could barely follow. 8 minutes later, she hit compile. It worked. "How did you?" Atlas began. "I've seen this problem before." She gathered her things, already heading for the door. "Good luck with your defense." "Wait." Atlas called after her. "What's your name?" She paused, a small smile playing at her lips. "Mara. Mara Sloane." Atlas didn't sleep that night. He aced his defense, but all he could think about was finding Mara again. It took 3 days of asking around the computer science department before he spotted her in the data systems lab, working alone on what looked like network architecture. "I brought coffee," he said, holding up 2 cups. "And a proper thank you." Mara looked up, surprised. "You didn't have to do that." "I did. You saved my thesis. And my academic career." He set the coffee beside her. "I'm Atlas Rourke." "I know who you are," she said, taking the coffee. "Your work on predictive market algorithms is impressive." Atlas felt a strange flutter in his chest. No one had ever recognized his work before. "How did you know how to fix my code?" "I see systems differently," she said simply. "Always have. It's like, seeing the spaces between things, not just the things themselves." That night, they talked until the security guard kicked them out. Atlas walked her home, their conversation never faltering. She was brilliant but humble, passionate about using technology to help people, not just make money. Everything about her was the opposite of his cold, calculating father. "My dad thinks empathy is a weakness," Atlas confessed as they reached her apartment. "He says it has no place in business or technology." Mara shook her head. "That's exactly why most systems fail. They're built without considering the humans who use them." Atlas found himself drawn to her like a magnet. Over the next few months, they became inseparable. Late nights in the lab turned into early morning walks home. Coffee breaks became dinner dates. Study sessions became moments where they'd simply sit in comfortable silence, working side by side. For the first time in his life, Atlas felt seen. Not for his family name or his potential, but for who he was beneath all that. Mara didn't care about the Rourke fortune or his father's connections. She cared about the way his mind worked, the dreams he had that went beyond profit margins. "I want to build something that matters," He told her one night as they lay on the roof of the computer science building, staring at what few stars could be seen through the city lights. Something that changes how people interact with money. Makes it more democratic. Mara turned to face him, her eyes serious. Just don't forget the human element. The best systems remember that behind every transaction is a person. Atlas pulled her close. How could I forget? You remind me every day. Their relationship wasn't perfect. Atlas carried the weight of his father's expectations, the pressure to be ruthless and ambitious. Sometimes that darkness would surface, and he'd withdraw into himself, become cold and distant. But Mara was patient. She'd give him space, then gently pull him back to the light. You're not him, she'd whisper when he'd apologize for his moods. You get to choose who you become. For a while, love made sense. Until it didn't. The call came on a Tuesday. Atlas was in Mara's apartment, helping her debug a community banking app she was building pro bono. His phone rang, and he recognized his father's private number. Excuse me, he said, stepping onto the balcony. Atlas, his father's voice was crisp, businesslike. I've been watching your work. I have a proposition for you. Atlas's heart raced. His father had never shown interest in his research before. Rourke Financial Technologies is launching a new division. We're building the next generation of trading infrastructure. I want you to lead it. Atlas gripped the railing. This was everything he'd worked for, a chance to implement his ideas on a massive scale. There are conditions, his father continued, his tone hardening. This project requires total commitment. No distractions. I understand, Atlas said. Do you? Because from what I've observed, you've been quite distracted lately. Atlas froze. His father had been having him watched. The Sloane girl. She's talented, I'll give you that. But she's not aligned with our vision. Her ideas about ethical technology and human-centered design are admirable in academia, but they have no place in our world. Dad, Mara is a liability, his father cut in. And an anchor. You have potential, son. Real potential. But you need to decide what matters more, changing the world or playing house with a girl who will never understand our ambitions. Atlas looked through the glass door at Mara, her face illuminated by her laptop screen, completely absorbed in her work. She was everything good in his life. The choice is yours, his father said. But know this, if you choose her, you're choosing mediocrity. If you choose the project, you choose legacy. After hanging up, Atlas stood on the balcony for a long time. When he finally came inside, Mara looked up with a smile that faded when she saw his face. What's wrong? She asked. He couldn't tell her. Couldn't admit that his father had given him an ultimatum. Couldn't face the choice he knew he was already making. Nothing, he lied. Just work stuff. That night, as Mara slept beside him, Atlas made his decision. He wouldn't have a dramatic breakup. He wouldn't give her a chance to change his mind. He would simply disappear. The next morning, he left before she woke up. He didn't leave a note. Didn't call. Didn't respond to her increasingly worried messages. He moved out of his apartment and into a company condo. He changed his number. He buried himself in the project, working round the clock to avoid thinking about what he'd done. Mara didn't chase him. Didn't plead. Didn't ask why. She simply disappeared from his life, respecting his silence as an answer in itself. What Atlas didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that she carried something with her. A child she hadn't planned for. A child with his mind hidden inside her heart. Hey everyone, this is Mr. Ellington Love Lines. If you're enjoying this story of love, loss, and redemption, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means everything to this channel. Mara discovered she was pregnant 6 weeks after Atlas vanished from her life. Sitting alone in her bathroom, staring at the positive test, she made a decision: she would raise this child with all the love and support she could provide, even if that meant doing it alone. She never considered contacting Atlas. His silence had been his answer. Whatever his reasons, he had chosen to walk away, and she wouldn't force him back with an obligation. "It's just you and me, little one," she whispered to her belly. "And we're going to be okay." Jace Sloane was born on a snowy January morning. From the moment he opened his eyes, green like his father's, Mara knew he was special. There was an awareness in his gaze, a curiosity that seemed beyond a newborn. As Jace grew, his brilliance became impossible to ignore. At 3, he was reading. At 4, he was asking questions about how computers worked. By 5, he was debugging children's software, finding glitches that even the developers had missed. "Mommy, this game is broken," he announced one day, his small face serious. "The treasure chest doesn't open when you solve the puzzle." Mara watched in amazement as her kindergartner methodically demonstrated the bug, then explained how it should be fixed. "How did you figure that out, sweetheart?" she asked. Jace shrugged, as if it were obvious. "I just see how it's supposed to work." Those words sent a chill down Mara's spine. They were too familiar. Too much like Atlas. As Jace grew older, the similarities became more pronounced. He had Atlas's intensity, his ability to focus on problems for hours. But thankfully, he had Mara's empathy, her concern for how technology affected people. When Jace was 10, his elementary school scheduling system crashed, causing chaos during the first week of classes. The principal was in tears, trying to manually assign hundreds of students to the right classrooms. Jace tugged on Mara's hand during drop-off. "Mom, I can fix it." "Honey, this is a big problem for the IT people," she tried to explain. But Jace was insistent. "It's just a database error." "Please, Mom. I can help." Against her better judgment, Mara approached the principal and offered Jace's assistance. Desperate, the woman agreed. 3 hours later, Jace had not only fixed the system but had rewritten parts of it to be more efficient. The principal was stunned. "Where did he learn to do this?" she asked Mara. Mara watched her son, his fingers flying across the keyboard with the same grace she'd once watched in Atlas. He was born with it. As Jace entered his teens, his abilities only grew more impressive. At 12, he discovered a vulnerability in the statewide standardized testing system. A flaw that could have exposed thousands of students' personal information. Instead of exploiting it, he documented the issue and sent a detailed report to the Department of Education. When officials showed up at their door, Mara feared her son was in trouble. Instead, they wanted to thank him, and offer him a scholarship. That incident led to Jace's first and only punishment related to computers, a 1-month ban from all devices. "But Mom, I fixed it," he protested. "I didn't do anything wrong." Mara sat him down, her expression serious. "Jace, I'm incredibly proud of what you did. But you accessed a secure government system without permission. Even for a good reason, that's crossing the line." Jace's face fell. "I just wanted to help." "I know, sweetheart." She hugged him tight. "That's what makes you special. You see problems and want to fix them. But you need to learn to ask permission first." Throughout his childhood, Jace occasionally asked about his father. Mara never lied, but she never gave him the full truth either. "Who was my dad?" he asked when he was 7. "He was brilliant," Mara told him, choosing her words carefully. "And he broke both our hearts." "Did he die?" Jace asked. "No, honey. He chose a different path." "Doesn't he want to know me?" The question broke Mara's heart. "He doesn't know about you. And that's not your fault. Sometimes adults make complicated choices." As Jace grew older, he stopped asking. But sometimes Mara would catch him searching online, looking at lists of tech innovators, studying their faces as if searching for his own reflection. She never told him his father's name. Never showed him pictures. She wanted Jace to become his own person, not live in the shadow of a man who had walked away. By 18, Jace had grown into a remarkable young man. Tall and lean like Atlas, with the same penetrating green eyes, but with Mara's gentle smile and compassionate nature. He was brilliant but humble, confident but kind. He'd won national coding competitions, developed apps for local nonprofits, and earned a full scholarship to MIT, his mother's alma mater. What he didn't know was that his father had become one of the most powerful men in American finance. That the algorithms he'd helped develop as a child bore an uncanny resemblance to the systems that now powered Wall Street. That the man whose blood ran through his veins had built an empire on the very ideas he'd abandoned Mara to pursue. Jace didn't know any of this. But fate has a way of bringing the past into the present, especially when the future of an entire financial system hangs in the balance. Atlas Rourke stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. At 45, he had achieved everything his father had demanded of him and more. RFT Systems. Rourke Financial Technologies controlled the algorithms that executed more than 70% of the nation's stock trades. His face had graced the cover of Fortune, Forbes, and Time. His net worth had 12 zeros. And he had never been more alone. His father had died 5 years earlier, leaving Atlas the controlling interest in the company. His mother lived in Europe, remarried to a count or duke or something equally removed from Atlas's world. He had dated occasionally, but no relationship lasted. Something was always missing, a connection he'd only felt once, long ago, with a woman whose name he still couldn't think about without pain. Mr. Rourke. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. The board is waiting in the conference room. Atlas straightened his tie. I'll be right there. The boardroom fell silent as he entered. 12 faces looked to him with the mixture of fear and respect he'd grown accustomed to. He had built this company on his father's foundation, but he'd made it his own, a technological marvel that had transformed how money moved through the American economy. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, today we launch Phase 3 of the Quantum Trading Initiative. Our new algorithm will reduce latency by another 0.002 seconds, giving our clients an edge that. His presentation was interrupted by a sharp knock. The door opened, and his chief technology officer rushed in, face pale. Sir, we have a situation. Atlas felt a flicker of irritation. Can it wait, James? No, sir. It's the core system. There's a glitch. The word sent a chill through the room. In high-frequency trading, a glitch could mean billions lost in seconds. What kind of glitch? Atlas kept his voice steady. A recursive error in the main execution loop. It started small, but it's growing. Exponentially. Atlas was already moving toward the door. How bad? Bad, sir. The failsafes aren't responding. We're seeing irregular trade patterns across all connected exchanges. By the time they reached the control center, chaos had erupted. Engineers rushed between workstations. Screens flashed with error messages. A large monitor on the wall showed stock prices plummeting across all major indices. Status report, Atlas demanded. A young engineer looked up, terror in her eyes. Sir, the algorithm is executing phantom trades. It's creating a feedback loop that's triggering real sell-offs. We've tried to implement the emergency shutdown, but it's not responding. How much have we lost? The market has dropped 8% in the last 15 minutes. That's roughly $900 million in value, and accelerating. Atlas felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't just a company crisis. This was a national economic disaster unfolding in real time. And it was happening on his watch. Get me direct lines to the SEC, the Federal Reserve, and the Treasury, Atlas ordered, his voice cutting through the panic. And someone find me a solution. Engineers scrambled, fingers flying across keyboards, voices rising in pitch as each attempted fix failed. The algorithms that had made Atlas billions were now threatening to destroy everything, not just his company, but potentially the entire American financial system. His phone rang. It was the SEC commissioner. "Rourke, what the hell is happening?" The commissioner's voice was tight with controlled fury. "We have a system anomaly. My team is working to contain it," Atlas replied, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. "Anomaly doesn't begin to cover it. The market is in freefall. We're getting calls from the White House." Atlas closed his eyes briefly. "We'll fix this. You'd better. And we want transparency. Full transparency. We're sending a team to your control center now. And we want this live streamed." Live streamed? Atlas nearly choked. "This is proprietary technology. This is a national emergency," the commissioner cut him off. "The public deserves to see what's happening. Either you open your doors and cameras, or we shut you down permanently. Your choice." Within 30 minutes, government officials had arrived, along with a hastily assembled media team. Cameras were set up around the control room, broadcasting live to millions of anxious Americans watching their retirement accounts evaporate. Atlas stood at the central command station, sweat beading on his forehead despite the room's aggressive air conditioning. Every solution his team proposed failed. Every backup system they tried to implement crashed. The market continued its death spiral. "Sir," James approached, his voice low. "There's only one option left." Atlas knew what he was going to say before he said it. "Rollback." James nodded grimly. "It's the only command that might work. But no one's ever used it," Atlas finished. "Because we don't know what it will do." Rollback was a theoretical emergency measure, coded into the system's deepest architecture. In theory, it would reset the entire trading platform to its state from 24 hours earlier, essentially erasing a day of transactions. But the command was so powerful, so potentially destabilizing, that it had never been tested in a live environment. "If we use rollback and it fails," James whispered, "we could crash the entire national banking system. Not just the stock market, everything." Atlas looked around the room at his engineers, all frozen in fear. No one wanted to be responsible for making things worse. No one dared touch that command. The cameras rolled. America watched. Atlas Rourke, the man who had built an empire on his ability to predict and control financial systems, stood helpless as his creation devoured itself. Across town, in the convention center where the National Young Innovators Fair was being held, 18-year-old Jace Sloane stood beside his project display. His entry, an algorithm that could detect and prevent predatory lending practices, had already won first place in the social impact category. A small crowd had gathered around a laptop where someone was streaming the financial crisis unfolding at RFT Systems. Jace drifted over, curious. "What we're seeing is unprecedented," a commentator was saying. RFT's trading algorithm has essentially gone rogue, triggering massive sell-offs across all markets. CEO Atlas Rourke and his team appear unable to contain the situation. Jace pushed closer, watching the screen intently. Something about the error messages flashing across the monitors in the control room looked familiar. Very familiar. "That's a buffer overflow," he murmured. "But why aren't there failsafes catching it?" The person next to him, an older man in a suit, glanced over. "You understand what's happening there, kid?" Jace nodded absently, his mind racing. "They're using the wrong stabilization protocol. See those cascading errors? That's because they're trying to patch the symptom, not the cause." The man studied him with sudden interest. "I'm with the Federal Reserve. We have people at RFT right now. if you really understand what's happening. 20 minutes later, Jace found himself being escorted through the gleaming lobby of RFT Systems, his science fair badge still hanging around his neck. Security was tight, but his unexpected companion from the Fed had enough authority to get them through. They entered the control room just as Atlas was saying, "We need to consider evacuating the building. If we can't stop this, you're running the wrong stabilization protocol." The words left Jace's mouth before he could stop himself. The room fell silent. All eyes, including the cameras, turned to the lanky teenager who had somehow appeared in their midst. Atlas Rourke turned sharply, irritation flashing across his face. "Who let a kid in here?" "Security." "Sir," the Fed representative stepped forward. "I brought him." He identified the problem just by looking at the live stream. "I think you should listen." A security guard moved toward Jace, but a woman from the SEC held up her hand. "Let him speak. We're out of options anyway." Atlas stared at the boy, tall, thin, with unruly dark hair and intense green eyes. Something about him seemed oddly familiar, but Atlas couldn't place it. "You have exactly 30 seconds, Atlas said coldly. Jace stepped forward, unfazed by the billionaire's tone. "Your system is experiencing a recursive error because your buffer management isn't accounting for the exponential growth of transaction requests. But you're trying to fix it by throttling the input, which is just making the backlog worse." The room was silent. Jace continued, his confidence growing. "I need to see your core architecture." James looked to Atlas, who hesitated, then nodded. "Show him." Jace plugged his laptop into the system, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he navigated through layers of code that would have been impenetrable to most programmers. But to him, it was like reading a familiar book. "This is elegant," he murmured, almost to himself. "The way the predictive models cascade, it's beautiful." Atlas moved closer, watching the boy work. There was something about the way he approached the problem, methodical yet intuitive, that stirred a distant memory. After several tense minutes, Jace looked up. "I found it. The error is in how the system handles recursive calls when transaction volume exceeds a certain threshold. It's creating a feedback loop that's amplifying with each iteration. Can you fix it?" Atlas asked, his earlier hostility replaced by desperate hope. Jace's expression turned grave. "There's only one way to stop this now. You have to use rollback." The room erupted in protests. "That's insane. We've never tested it. It could wipe out the entire network." Jace remained calm amid the chaos. "It won't. Not if you prime the buffer first." Atlas stepped closer, studying the young man's face. "How do you know that?" Jace met his gaze steadily, and for a moment, something passed between them, a recognition neither could name. "Because that's how I would have designed it." The words hit Atlas straight in the chest. For a heartbeat, he was back in that university lab 20 years ago, hearing another voice say almost the same thing, "I see systems differently. Always have." The cameras zoomed in. The world leaned forward. In living rooms and offices across America, millions held their breath. "Let him try," Atlas said quietly. Everyone else, step back. If you're finding this story of unexpected connections and high-stakes moments compelling, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to Mr. Ellington Lovelines. Your support helps me bring more stories like this one to life. Jace's hands moved with practiced precision as he wrote a series of commands to prepare the system. The control room was silent except for the soft clicking of his keyboard and the occasional murmur from the government officials huddled in the corner. "What exactly are you doing?" Atlas asked, watching over Jace's shoulder. "I'm creating a temporary buffer to capture the system state," Jace explained without looking up. "When rollback executes, it needs somewhere to store the current configuration before resetting. Without this buffer, you'd lose everything." Atlas watched the boy work, a strange feeling growing in his chest. There was something so familiar about his methods, about the way he approached problems. Looking not just at the immediate issue but at the entire system holistically. "How do you know our architecture so well?" Atlas asked quietly. "These are proprietary systems." Jace paused for just a moment. "I don't know your specific implementation. But the underlying principles are logical. It's how I would build it." On the screens above them, the market continued its plunge. Another $100 million vanished in the time it took Jace to prepare his solution. "Almost ready," Jace announced. "I've stabilized the buffer and isolated the recursive loop. Now I need to execute the rollback command." He pulled up the command terminal. The screen displayed "Rollback. Yes/no." Jace's finger hovered over the keyboard. "Wait," a director called out. "This is too risky. We should evacuate, shut down the power to the entire building if we have to." "That won't work," Jace replied calmly. "The system is distributed across multiple data centers. A local shutdown would just trigger the failover protocols and make things worse." "Don't, please don't," the director begged. Atlas stepped forward, standing directly behind Jace. Their eyes met in the reflection of the monitor. For a moment, Atlas saw himself at 18, brilliant, confident, facing an impossible problem with unwavering certainty. "Do it," Atlas said softly. Jace took a deep breath and pressed. "Yes." The system froze. Every screen in the control room went black. A collective gasp filled the room. For 3 excruciating seconds, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the monitors flickered back to life. A message appeared, "Market restored. All systems stable." The room erupted in cheers. Engineers hugged each other. Government officials sighed in relief. On the large market display, stock prices stabilized, then began to climb as confidence returned. Jace sat back in his chair, a small, satisfied smile on his face. He had done it. He had halted a $900 million disaster live, under pressure, on national television. Atlas stood frozen, staring at the young man who had just saved his company, saved the entire financial system, with a solution that none of his highly paid experts had been able to devise. "How?" Atlas finally managed to ask. "How did you know that would work?" Jace shrugged, suddenly looking like the teenager he was. The rollback command was elegant, but it needed the right preparation. Whoever designed it built it as a last resort, but they made sure it would work if properly implemented. Atlas felt a chill run down his spine. He had designed that command himself, years ago, as a theoretical failsafe he never thought would be needed. He had built in exactly the requirements that Jace had somehow intuited. As the crisis subsided and the immediate danger passed, the control room began to empty. Government officials huddled with Atlas's executive team to discuss next steps. The media began packing up their equipment, already crafting headlines about the teenage genius who had saved Wall Street. Through it all, Atlas couldn't take his eyes off Jace. There was something about him, something beyond his technical brilliance, that tugged at Atlas's consciousness. When the room had mostly cleared, Atlas approached him. "I owe you a debt I can never repay. You saved not just my company, but potentially the entire financial system." Jace nodded, suddenly awkward now that the technical challenge was over. "I'm glad I could help. What's your name?" "Your full name?" "Jace. Jace Sloane." The name hit Atlas like a physical blow. Sloane. It couldn't be a coincidence. "And your mother?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Mara Sloane. She's a systems engineer." Atlas gripped the edge of the desk to steady himself. "Mara. After all these years. And this boy. This brilliant young man who thought exactly like him, who could see systems the way he did, was named Sloane. How old are you, Jace?" 18. Just turned 18 in January. Atlas did the math quickly. 18 years. 9 months after he had walked away from Mara without a word. 9 months after he had chosen ambition over love. The realization must have shown on his face, because Jace's expression changed, a wariness entering his eyes. "Mr. Rourke. Are you okay?" Atlas wasn't okay. He was experiencing the most profound shock of his life. Standing before him was not just a brilliant young programmer who had saved his company. Standing before him was his son. As the last of the government officials and media crews filed out, Atlas asked his team to give him the room. James gave him a curious look but nodded, ushering the remaining staff out and closing the door behind them. Now it was just Atlas and Jace in the silent control room, surrounded by screens showing the recovered market, the crisis averted. Atlas's voice was barely a whisper, "Who is your father?" The question clearly caught Jace off guard. He stiffened, his expression guarded. "I don't see how that's relevant to what just happened." "Please," Atlas said, and something in his tone made Jace pause. Jace looked him straight in the eyes. "My mom said he was brilliant. But he didn't know how to stay." Atlas staggered backward as if physically struck, collapsing into a nearby chair. His heart thundered in his chest. The description was devastating in its accuracy. "Mara," he whispered, her name feeling foreign on his lips after so many years of forcing himself not to say it. Jace nodded, his eyes narrowing with sudden suspicion. "You know my mother?" Atlas couldn't speak. His mind was racing, piecing together a reality he had never imagined. He had a son. A brilliant, remarkable son who had just saved everything Atlas had built. A son he had never known existed. "We knew each other," Atlas finally managed. "A long time ago." Understanding dawned slowly on Jace's face. He took a step back, his eyes widening. You're him, aren't you? You're my father." It wasn't a question. The resemblance, now that they were looking for it, was unmistakable. The same green eyes. The same jawline. The same way of seeing systems not as isolated components but as interconnected wholes. Atlas nodded, unable to deny it. "I think I am." "I didn't know, Jace. I swear to you, I didn't know." Jace's expression hardened. "Would it have mattered if you did?" The question cut through Atlas like a knife. Would it have changed anything? Would he have made different choices if he had known Mara was pregnant? He wanted to say yes, but he couldn't be sure. The man he had been 20 years ago had been ambitious, driven, willing to sacrifice anything, even love, for success. "I don't know," he admitted, the truth painful but necessary. "I was different then." Jace studied him, his gaze unflinching. "She never told me your name. Never showed me your picture. But she made sure I knew you weren't a villain." "She did?" Atlas was surprised. "She said not to hate you. She said sometimes people choose power because they don't know how to choose love." The words were like a physical blow. Mara had every right to paint him as the villain in their story, but instead, she had given their son a more nuanced understanding. She had protected Jace not just from Atlas's absence but from the bitterness that could have poisoned him. "Does she?" His voice cracked. "Does she hate me?" Jace shook his head. "No. But she outgrew you." The simple statement carried more weight than 1,000 accusations could have. Mara hadn't spent the last 18 years nursing her wounds or cursing his name. She had moved forward. Raised their son. Built a life that didn't revolve around Atlas's absence. She had outgrown him, while he had spent almost 2 decades building an empire that suddenly felt hollow. "She's remarkable," Atlas said softly. "She always was." "Yes," Jace agreed. "She is." An awkward silence fell between them. "What did you say to the son you never knew you had?" "To the father who had never been there." I should go, Jace finally said, gathering his laptop. My mom will be wondering where I am. The science fair ended hours ago. Science fair? Atlas asked. Yeah. I was presenting my project when all this happened. An algorithm that identifies predatory lending patterns in financial data. Atlas felt a surge of pride, followed immediately by grief for all the moments he had missed. Jace, he said as the young man turned to leave. Would you tell your mother I'd like to see her? To talk. Jace paused at the door, considering the request. I'll tell her. But it's her choice. Of course, Atlas nodded. And Jace, thank you. Not just for saving my company, but for letting me meet you, even under these circumstances. Jace gave him a small, guarded smile. I've spent my whole life wondering who you were. I just never expected to find out like this. After Jace left, Atlas remained in the empty control room, surrounded by the technology that had defined his life, the empire he had chosen over Mara. For the first time, he questioned whether it had been worth it. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from board members, investors, and media outlets, all demanding updates and explanations. For once, Atlas ignored them all. There was only one person he wanted to speak to now. He pulled up a search engine and typed. Mara Sloane Systems Engineer. Her professional profile appeared immediately. She had founded her own consulting firm specializing in ethical technology design. Her client list included nonprofits, educational institutions, and companies committed to responsible innovation. She had built exactly the career she had always dreamed of, using technology to help people, not just generate profit. Atlas stared at her photo. She looked different. Her hair shorter, a few lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, but her smile was the same. That warm, genuine smile that had once made him believe he could be more than his father's son. Before he could talk himself out of it, Atlas copied down her company address. There was something he needed to do, and it couldn't wait another day. If you're enjoying this emotional journey of reconnection and redemption, please take a moment to subscribe to Mr. Ellington Love Lines. Your support helps me continue sharing stories that touch the heart and remind us of what truly matters in life. That evening, Atlas stood outside a modest brownstone in Brooklyn, his heart pounding as if he were a graduate student again, not a billionaire CEO. The address matched the one listed for Mara's company, a home office, apparently. He had changed out of his expensive suit into jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He didn't want to arrive as Atlas Rourke, financial titan. He wanted to come as Atlas, the man who had once loved Mara Sloane. His finger hovered over the doorbell. What would he say? How could he possibly explain his actions? Apologize for his absence? Thank her for raising their son to be such an extraordinary young man? Before he could press the bell, the door opened. Jace stood there, his expression unreadable. I saw you from the window, he explained. You've been standing there for 5 minutes. Atlas managed a sheepish smile. I'm trying to find the right words. There aren't any, Jace said simply. Not for this. But he stepped aside, a silent invitation to enter. The home was warm and inviting, bookshelves lining the walls, comfortable furniture, framed photographs documenting Jace's childhood. Atlas's eyes were drawn to them immediately, Jace as a toddler building with blocks, as a young boy holding a science fair ribbon, as a teenager at what looked like a coding competition. A lifetime of moments Atlas had missed. Is she? Atlas began. In the kitchen, Jace replied. I told her you might come. Atlas followed Jace through the living room, his footsteps heavy with the weight of almost 2 decades of absence. And then, suddenly, she was there. Mara stood by the kitchen counter, a mug of tea in her hands. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, her curly hair now streaked with a few strands of silver. She looked exactly as Atlas had imagined she would. Strong, composed, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional standards and everything to do with the light that seemed to emanate from within her. Their eyes met. 18 years of silence sat between them. "Mara," he said, her name almost a prayer on his lips. "Atlas." Her voice was steady, neither warm nor cold. "You look successful." He almost laughed at the simple truth of it. "I am. By some definitions." Jace looked between them. "I'll give you two some privacy." "No," Mara said quickly. "Stay, Jace. Whatever needs to be said can be said with you here. This concerns you most of all." Atlas nodded in agreement. "She's right." Jace leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a silent observer to this long overdue reunion. "I saw what happened today," Mara said. "It was all over the news. Teenage genius saves Wall Street. They didn't mention your name, Jace, thank goodness. The SEC agreed to keep him anonymous for now," Atlas explained. "To protect his privacy." Mara nodded. "That's something, at least." She took a sip of her tea, studying Atlas over the rim of her mug. "So. You know." "I know," Atlas confirmed. "Mara, why didn't you tell me?" Her expression didn't change. "You made your choice, Atlas. You walked away without a word. No explanation. No goodbye. Just silence. What was I supposed to do? Chase after you? Beg you to acknowledge your child? I would have. Would you?" She cut him off. "Would you really have chosen differently? Your father made you choose between me and your ambitions. You chose your ambitions. Would adding a baby to the equation have changed that calculation?" Atlas wanted to say yes, to insist that he would have done the right thing. But he couldn't be sure. The man he had been then, driven, ruthless, desperate for his father's approval, might have seen a child as just another complication. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I deserved the chance to make that choice." "And Jace deserved a father who wanted to be there," Mara countered. "Not one who saw him as an obligation." Atlas had no answer for that. She was right, as she so often had been. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I've regretted walking away every day since." Mara's expression softened slightly. "Have you? Or have you just regretted being alone at the top?" The question struck at the heart of his carefully constructed life. Had he truly regretted losing Mara, or had he simply regretted the emptiness that came with success without someone to share it with? "Both," he finally said. "I built everything my father wanted me to build. I became everything he wanted me to become. And I lost the only person who ever saw me as more than that." Jace shifted uncomfortably. "I should really give you two some space." "No," Atlas said. "Please stay, Jace. I've missed 18 years of your life. I don't want to miss another minute." The words hung in the air, their implication clear. Atlas wasn't just here to make amends for the past. He wanted a place in their future. Mara set down her mug. "What exactly are you hoping for here, Atlas? You can't just walk into our lives and expect to pick up where you left off. We've built a life without you. A good one." "I know," Atlas said. "I can see that. And I'm not trying to disrupt what you've built. I want a chance to know my son. And maybe, someday, to earn back some small measure of your trust." Mara studied him, her gaze penetrating as ever. "And what about RFT? Your company? Your empire? Are you just going to commute to Brooklyn for dinner once a week?" It was a fair question. Atlas's life was in Manhattan, in boardrooms and control centers. His days were filled with meetings and decisions that affected global markets. How could he possibly integrate that reality with this modest brownstone in Brooklyn? "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't have all the answers. But for the first time in 20 years, I'm asking the right questions. Jace, who had been quiet throughout this exchange, finally spoke. Mom always said you were brilliant but that you didn't know how to stay. Is that still true? The question, coming from his son, hit Atlas with unexpected force. Was he still the man who walked away when things got complicated? Or had he learned, over these lonely years at the top, the value of what he had lost? Atlas whispered, Mara. I didn't know. But now that I do, I want to try. Mara didn't smile. Didn't soften. But she didn't close the door either. Instead, she said, trying is a start. Just don't fail him. Atlas nodded, tears burning his eyes. For the first time. I won't. The three of them stood in the kitchen, an unlikely family brought together by crisis and code. There were no easy answers, no simple solutions. The path forward would be complicated, messy, and uncertain. But for the first time in 18 years, there was a path. Would you like some tea? Mara finally asked, breaking the tension. I was just about to make dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta. I'd like that, Atlas said. Very much. As Mara turned to fill the kettle, Jace caught Atlas's eye and gave him a small, cautious smile. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't acceptance. That would take time. But it was an opening, a crack in the door that had been closed for 18 years. For a man who had built his fortune on predicting outcomes and controlling variables, Atlas was stepping into the most unpredictable situation of his life. He had no algorithm for this, no model that could forecast how to build a relationship with the son he never knew and rebuild trust with the woman he had never stopped loving. But as he watched Jace help Mara with dinner preparations, moving around the kitchen with the easy familiarity of routine, Atlas knew one thing with absolute certainty: this, not his corner office, not his billions, not his empire of code and capital, was what mattered. He had been given a second chance. And this time, he wouldn't walk away. The weeks following the market crisis unfolded in a blur of contradictions for Atlas. By day, he was still the billionaire CEO, navigating the aftermath of the system failure, implementing Jace's fixes, and reassuring investors that RFT was stable again. By night, he was simply Atlas, a man trying to find his place in the lives of his son and the woman he had abandoned almost 2 decades earlier. The first dinner had been awkward, conversations stilted and careful. But it was a beginning. Atlas returned the next night, and the next, each visit a small step towards something that none of them could yet define. You don't have to come every night, Mara told him after the 5th consecutive evening. We're not going anywhere. Atlas had smiled at that. I know. I'm trying to make up for lost time. You can't, she said simply. But you can be present now. Present. It was a concept Atlas had forgotten in his years of chasing the future, of building systems designed to predict and control what came next. Being present meant accepting the moment as it was, messy, imperfect, beyond his control. Jace was cautious at first, keeping conversations focused on technology and code, safe territory where father and son shared an undeniable connection. But gradually, he began to open up, sharing stories from his childhood, his interests beyond programming, his dreams for the future. I want to build systems that help people, he told Atlas one evening as they walked through the neighborhood after dinner. Not just make money move faster. Atlas recognized Mara's influence in those words, but also something uniquely Jace, a clarity of purpose that Atlas himself had lost somewhere along the way. What about MIT? Atlas asked. Are you still planning to go? Jace nodded. In the fall. I got a full scholarship. You don't need the scholarship, Atlas said automatically. No, Jace cut him off firmly. I earned that scholarship. I'm not giving it up just because my biological father turns out to be rich. Atlas felt both chastened and proud. You're right. I'm sorry. As they walked in silence for a moment, Atlas realized something important. He wasn't just getting to know his son. He was learning from him. Learning how to be principled in a way that had nothing to do with profit margins or market share. Back at the brownstone, Mara was working late in her home office. Atlas paused in the doorway, watching her focus on her screen, her expression intent. It was so familiar, that same look of concentration he had fallen in love with 20 years ago. She sensed his presence and looked up. "Everything okay?" "Yes," he said. "Jace was telling me about MIT." Mara smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "He worked so hard for that scholarship. I'm so proud of him." "You should be," Atlas said. "You raised an extraordinary young man." "We got lucky," she replied. "He was born with your mind and somehow ended up with my heart." The words weren't meant as a criticism, but they hit home nonetheless. Atlas had spent his career building systems that prioritized efficiency over empathy, profit over people. He had become his father's son after all. "Mara," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something." She set aside her work, giving him her full attention. "What is it?" "If I had known about Jace, if I had come back, would you have forgiven me?" Mara considered the question carefully. 19 years ago? Probably not. I was hurt and angry. But now? She shrugged. "I stopped being angry a long time ago, Atlas. Raising Jace took all my energy and all my love. There wasn't room for holding on to bitterness." "You're remarkable," he said softly. "No," she corrected him. "I'm a parent. You do what you have to do." Atlas nodded, understanding dawning slowly. "I want to be a parent too. If Jace will let me. If you'll let me." Mara studied him, her gaze as penetrating as ever. "Why? Because he saved your company? Because he's brilliant? Or because he's your son?" "Because he's my son," Atlas said without hesitation. Even if he had never set foot in RFT, even if he had different interests or abilities, he would still be my son. "I've missed so much, Mara. I don't want to miss any more." Something in her expression softened. "Then be here. Not just physically, but emotionally. Be present, like you said. That's what Jace needs, what any child needs from a parent." Atlas nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "I'm trying." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm letting you in." As the weeks turned into months, a new routine emerged. Atlas kept his penthouse in Manhattan but spent most evenings in Brooklyn. He adjusted his schedule, delegating more responsibilities at RFT, making time for what truly mattered. Jace graduated high school as valedictorian. Atlas sat in the audience beside Mara, his heart swelling with pride as his son delivered a speech about using technology to build a more equitable world. "That's all, Mara," he whispered to her during the applause. She shook her head. "Not entirely. He gets his vision from you, the ability to see what could be. He just aims it in a different direction." After the ceremony, as they posed for photos, an awkward family portrait of three people still finding their way to each other, Atlas realized something profound. For the first time in his adult life, he felt truly successful. Not because of his wealth or his company, but because he was exactly where he needed to be. That night, after Jace had gone out to celebrate with friends, Atlas and Mara sat on her small back patio, sharing a bottle of wine under the stars. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For not shutting the door. For giving me a chance to know him. To know you again." Mara was quiet for a moment. "I didn't do it for you, Atlas. I did it for Jace. He deserved the chance to know his father." "I know," Atlas acknowledged. "But I'm grateful nonetheless." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes with history, with knowing someone deeply despite the years apart. "What happens now?" Atlas finally asked. Jace goes to MIT in the fall. And you and I. He let the question hang in the air between them. Mara turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. I don't know, Atlas. We're not the same people we were 19 years ago. You built your empire. I built my life. They're very different worlds. They don't have to be, he said softly. I've been thinking a lot about what matters. About what I want RFT to become. Mara raised an eyebrow. Oh. The system failure, it was a wake-up call. Not just about technical vulnerabilities, but about purpose. What's the point of moving money faster if it doesn't make people's lives better? Mara studied him, searching for sincerity. That doesn't sound like the Atlas Rourke who makes the financial news. No, he agreed. It sounds more like the graduate student you knew. The one who wanted to build something that mattered. She smiled slightly. I remember him. I liked him. I'm trying to find my way back to him, Atlas admitted. With your help. And Jace's. Mara didn't respond immediately, but she didn't pull away when Atlas cautiously reached for her hand. Progress, of a sort. The summer passed in a blur of preparations for Jace's departure to college. Atlas helped where he could. Buying supplies, arranging transportation, setting up accounts, careful not to overstep or use his wealth to take over. This was Mara and Jace's journey, he was just grateful to be included. On the day they drove Jace to MIT, all three squeezed into Mara's modest sedan rather than Atlas's chauffeured SUV. It was a conscious choice, a statement about the kind of father Atlas wanted to be. Not the billionaire CEO swooping in with privilege, but a dad helping his son move into his dorm. As they unpacked boxes and arranged Jace's small room, Atlas felt a strange mix of pride and grief, proud of the young man his son had become, grieving for all the moments he had missed. You okay? Jace asked, catching Atlas staring out the window. Just thinking about how much I missed, Atlas admitted. Your first day of kindergarten. Learning to ride a bike. Your first science fair. Jace was quiet for a moment. We can't get those back. I know. But, Jace continued, we're here now. That counts for something. Atlas smiled, blinking back unexpected tears. It counts for everything. When it was time to say goodbye, Mara hugged Jace tightly, whispering something in his ear that made him laugh through his own tears. Then it was Atlas's turn. He stood awkwardly, unsure of the protocol. Were they at the hugging stage yet? But Jace made the decision for him, stepping forward and embracing him briefly but firmly. Thank you, Atlas said. For giving me a chance. Don't waste it, Jace replied, his voice serious despite his smile. The drive back to Brooklyn was quiet, both Atlas and Mara lost in their thoughts. When they arrived at her brownstone, Atlas hesitated. Would you like to come in? Mara asked. The house is going to feel very empty tonight. Atlas nodded, understanding completely. They ordered takeout and ate in comfortable silence, both processing the milestone they had just experienced, their son's first day of college. He's going to be amazing, Atlas said. He already is, Mara replied. Later, as Atlas prepared to leave, Mara walked him to the door. This is strange, isn't it? Co-parenting an adult after all these years apart. Strange, Atlas agreed. But good. He hesitated, then added, Mara, I know we can't go back. I know too much has happened. But I want you to know, I never stopped loving you. Even when I convinced myself I had. Mara's expression was unreadable. Atlas. You don't have to say anything, he assured her quickly. I just wanted you to know. No expectations. No pressure. She nodded slowly. Thank you for being honest. Finally. It wasn't a declaration of returned feelings, but it wasn't a rejection either. Like everything in their new relationship, it was complicated, nuanced, a work in progress. As fall turned to winter, Atlas divided his time between RFT and Brooklyn. He initiated a major restructuring of the company, shifting its focus toward more ethical financial technologies, systems designed to increase access rather than just speed, to protect consumers rather than just profits. The business press called it the Rourke Reformation, speculating about what had caused one of finance's most ruthless innovators to suddenly develop a conscience. Atlas never mentioned Jace or Mara in interviews. Their relationship remained private, protected from the media circus that would inevitably follow if the truth came out. Jace thrived at MIT, calling home regularly to share his experiences. He spoke to Mara about his classes and friends, to Atlas about his coding projects and technological ideas. Slowly, they were building a family dynamic that worked for all of them. During Jace's winter break, the three of them spent Christmas together in Mara's brownstone. It was Atlas's first real Christmas in decades. His family traditions had always revolved around business, not warmth or connection. "We always open one gift on Christmas Eve," Mara explained as they sat around her small tree. "It's been our tradition since Jace was little." Atlas watched as Jace selected a package for his mother, his face alight with the same excitement Atlas imagined he'd had as a child. Mara opened it to find a handcrafted jewelry box Jace had made in the university's fabrication lab. "It's beautiful," she whispered, running her fingers over the intricate pattern. "Your turn, Mom," Jace prompted. "Pick someone to give a gift to." Mara hesitated, then selected a small package and handed it to Atlas. "It's not much," she said. Atlas unwrapped it carefully to find a framed photograph. Jace at about 5 years old, grinning widely, missing his front teeth, holding up what looked like a homemade robot. "His first invention," Mara explained. "I thought you might like to have it." Atlas couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. It was more than a photograph, it was a piece of the history he had missed, freely given. "Thank you," he finally managed. When it was his turn, Atlas handed Jace a small envelope. Inside was a key. "What's this?" Jace asked. "The key to my first apartment," Atlas explained. "The one I lived in when I met your mother. I kept it all these years. It's where I wrote the original code that eventually became RFT's core algorithm." Jace turned the key over in his hand, understanding the significance. "Thanks, Dad." It was the first time Jace had called him Dad. The word hung in the air between them, momentous in its simplicity. That night, after Jace had gone to bed, Atlas and Mara sat by the fire, the Christmas tree lights casting a warm glow over the room. "He called me Dad," Atlas said, still processing the moment. Mara smiled. "I noticed. I don't deserve it." "Probably not," she agreed. "But he's giving it to you anyway. That's who he is, who I raised him to be. Someone who sees the best in people, who gives second chances." Atlas looked at her, this remarkable woman who had shaped their son into someone far better than Atlas could have imagined. "He gets that from you." "Some of it," she acknowledged. "But some of it is just Jace." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire. Atlas realized that for the first time in his adult life, he felt at peace. Not restless, not driven by ambition or the need to prove himself. Just, present. "Mara," he said softly. "I know we can't go back. But do you think? Is there any chance we could move forward? Together?" She didn't answer immediately, her gaze still on the flames. When she finally looked at him, her expression was thoughtful. "I don't know, Atlas. We've both changed so much. And your world is still so different from mine." "It doesn't have to be," he said. "I'm changing RFT. Redirecting its purpose. And I'm changing too. Because of Jace. Because of both of you," he admitted. "You showed me what really matters. What success actually looks like." Mara reached for his hand, her touch tentative but warm. I can't make any promises. But I'm open to seeing where this goes. Slowly. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't forgiveness for 19 years of absence. But it was a beginning, a chance to build something new from the ashes of what they had once been to each other. As they sat hand in hand, watching the fire burn down to embers, Atlas thought about the strange, winding path that had led him here. How a system failure had revealed what truly mattered. How his son, the brilliant young man he never knew existed, had not only saved his company but had saved him from the empty success he had built. And how Mara, the woman he had walked away from all those years ago, was giving him the chance to become the man he should have been all along. If you've been moved by this story of redemption, reconnection, and second chances, please take a moment to subscribe to Mr. Ellington Love Lines. Your support allows me to continue sharing stories that remind us it's never too late to rebuild what was broken and find our way back to what truly matters. 1 year after the market crisis that brought them together, Atlas, Mara, and Jace gathered in Atlas's Manhattan penthouse to celebrate. RFT Systems had just launched its most ambitious project yet, a financial inclusion platform designed to provide banking services to underserved communities. To new beginnings, Atlas raised his glass, looking at the two people who had changed his life so completely. Jace, home from MIT for the weekend, grinned. And to system upgrades. Mara laughed. Only in this family would system upgrades be a toast. Family. The word still felt new to Atlas, precious in a way no financial success ever had. The past year had been one of transformation, for all of them. Atlas had redirected RFT's focus, using the company's technological prowess to address financial inequality rather than just accelerate wealth for those who already had it. The business press had been skeptical at first, but the results were beginning to speak for themselves. Jace had completed his freshman year with honors and was already working on research projects that combined his father's financial expertise with his mother's ethical framework. He spent holidays and some weekends with both parents, sometimes in Brooklyn, sometimes in Manhattan, building relationships that grew stronger with each passing day. And Mara. Mara had cautiously opened her heart again. Not all at once, not without reservations, but step by step. She and Atlas had begun dating, an odd concept for two people with so much history, but necessary for building something new rather than trying to resurrect what had been. I have news, Jace announced as they moved to the living room after dinner. I've been offered an internship at the Federal Reserve for next summer. Working on their financial inclusion task force. That's wonderful. Mara exclaimed. Atlas nodded proudly. They're lucky to have you. Actually, Jace said, looking slightly embarrassed, they specifically requested me because of what happened last year. Apparently, saving the financial system from collapse makes for a pretty good resume item. They all laughed, the crisis now far enough in the past to have become part of their family lore rather than a painful reminder of what they had almost lost. Later, after Jace had gone to bed in the guest room that was now permanently his, Atlas and Mara stood on the penthouse balcony, looking out at the city lights. He's going to change the world, Atlas said softly. In ways I never could. Mara leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. Because he has both of us. Your vision and my heart. Atlas put his arm around her, still amazed that she was here, that they were building something together after so many years apart. I was thinking, he said carefully, about the future. About us. Mara looked up at him. Oh. I'm not proposing, he clarified quickly. Not yet. I know we're still finding our way. But I wanted you to know that's where I hope we're heading. Eventually. Mara smiled. I know. And I'm open to that possibility. When we're ready. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city below. So much had changed in a year. Atlas had gone from a solitary billionaire to a father, a partner, a man reconnected to his own humanity. Mara had opened her carefully constructed life to include the man who had once broken her heart. And Jace had gained not just a father but a deeper understanding of his own identity and purpose. You know, Mara said thoughtfully, when Jace was little, he used to ask me if his father would ever come back. I never knew what to tell him. What did you say? Atlas asked. I told him that some people aren't ready to be fathers. That it wasn't about him, but about you. That someday, he'd understand. Atlas felt the familiar pang of regret for all the years he had missed. Was he angry? Sometimes, Mara admitted. But mostly he was just curious. He wanted to know where he came from, who he resembled, why he could see patterns in code that his classmates couldn't. And now? Mara smiled. Now he knows. And despite everything, I think he's glad. Atlas pulled her closer. I don't deserve either of you. Probably not, she agreed with a teasing smile. But you're stuck with us anyway. As they stood together under the stars, Atlas thought about the strange, unpredictable algorithm of life. How one decision, one moment, could set in motion a cascade of events that no system could predict. How walking away from love had led to 18 years of hollow success, and how a system failure had ultimately led him back to what mattered most. His son had hit rollback that day in the control room, resetting not just the financial markets but Atlas's entire life. Giving him a second chance he never knew he needed. And this time, he wouldn't fail. Thank you for joining me for this emotional journey of redemption and reconnection. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Mr. Ellington Love Lines for more tales that remind us of the power of second chances and the true meaning of success. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to share more stories with you soon.